Hi everyone. So I am obviously outside at the moment. I'm at my mom's house, and just disclaimer: I'm sorry if it's loud in the background, and if there's a lot going on. And I also apologize for the glasses. I'm on antibiotics, which make me really sun sensitive, and I get migraines really bad. So I'm having to shield myself, but it's also so beautiful outside. So here we are. I also apologize if I look like a bum. You know, there's just sometimes you try in life, and sometimes you just have to roll with where you're at. So this is where we're at, and you're all just gonna get bummy version of Claire. So I wanted to make this video because I know that there's a lot of people who are kind of new to my page, or there's a lot of people that are new to what I'm up to, or new to my story. And there's also a lot of people who've been around for a while that I realize I never really gave a full description of what's going on to, you know? I kind of have this thing where I like to not really go into the details of my health all that much, not because I don't believe that they're important, but because people tend to get really caught up on the details of it, and then I just end up being in this constant merry-go-round of answering questions about the details of my situation. And the thing is, it's complicated, and I hate to be the one that says that, but anyone who's had any kind of illness or has gone through anything like this knows it's really up in the air, and it's complicated, and it changes all the time depending on new advancements in technology, or depending on, you know, how hard you try or what you're doing at the time. And so it's really hard for me to sit here and tell you this is what's going on with my health, this is what it's going to look like in a year from now, let alone what it's going to look like in a few months from now. But there is kind of a general picture that I can paint for everyone, and I just wanted to take the time to do that and explain where I'm actually at in my health, and what my life expectancy is, what my options are, you know, what kind of the quality of my life is at the moment. Because, you know, as much as I think, for me, I've always had this thing where I really want to make content that's not just dependent on my illness, or put things out into the world that aren't just dependent on my illness. And so there's a part of me that doesn't want to talk about it because I don't just want it to be about my illness. The truth is that I can't pretend like, you know, I think I should wait for the giant plane that's going overhead to pass before I say anything important. One moment. I also, another warning, I have Mexican food coming, so if there's a plate of fajitas that magically appear in front of me, the best.
Or magical.
Awesome. Do you get fajitas?
Yup.
Alright, I'll be in soon. I'm just gonna finish this. So, anyway. So I'm at this weird place in life where, I don't want to have to talk about my health all the time, and I don't want it to be the center of every single video, but the truth is, it is the center of my life, you know, and I can't pretend to you or to myself or to anyone really that it's not completely consuming me at the moment. And in a weird way, it's like, you know, I've always been someone that really wants to be, there's no way to say it where it doesn't sound corny, but I have wanted to be a lot more than my illness, and not, you know, have that be the only thing that I talk about with people. But at the moment, it is the biggest part of my life, and so I can't avoid explaining things to you guys, and I can't avoid telling you all about it, or keep you all in the dark. So, life expectancy. So around 2.5 years ago, I went to get evaluated for a lung transplant. And at the time, I really, really did not want to get one. And there's a lot of reasons why, and I can make a full video as to why I didn't want a lung transplant, but it was really detailed and specific, and I also, it wasn't the right time for me in my life. Like, I didn't feel like it was the right time for a transplant, which I guess, you know, in a lot of ways you don't ever really feel like it is. But at that time, the doctor told me I had around 2 years left. So their life expectancy for me was around 20 to 21. I'm currently 21, and I have been for a few months. And over the past 4 months or so, no, over the past 6 months or so, I'd say, my health has declined dramatically. Like, just took a freaking plummet. And when you're growing up with cystic fibrosis, because that is what I have, for those of you who have not already been informed, it's drilled into you all the time that when your health changes, it's going to be a really dramatic change, and it's going to happen really fast. And so I grew up knowing that when things were going to turn the corner, it was going to be really jarring, and so I was mentally prepared for it, but I don't think I was really physically prepared for what that actually looks like. What happened is I had two jobs, one in Indianapolis and one in Philadelphia, and I'm a public speaker, and so I travel a lot for speaking, and these were going to be my last jobs for a little while. I was going to rest for a bit, and I ended up getting a really bad infection while I was traveling and speaking, and so I managed to finish both of the jobs, but right after the one in Philadelphia, I collapsed, and I had to go to the ER and get admitted to the hospital there, which, thank God, they were a beautiful, like, insanely good cystic fibrosis center, which is really rare to just be in a random city that has a great CF center, like, really lucky. But I was there for around 2 weeks, and they told me I couldn't fly home. I wasn't healthy enough to fly anymore, which I've made my entire life, my entire career, and the way that I make money and the way that I've kind of carved a place for myself in this world is through speaking and through traveling, both for my nonprofit and just for personal reasons. And so that was a really big change for me, because for the first time ever, I wasn't going to be able to provide for myself, and I wasn't going to be able to travel, and I wasn't going to be able to actually live the life that I'd kind of built for myself, directly because of my illness, not because of any kind of decisions or anything like that. So, where was I? So Philadelphia. So I was there for 2 weeks, and we ended up having to take a train back home because I couldn't fly. And when I got home, kind of in a snowball effect since that hospital stay, my health has been on a steady decline. What that actually looks like is just that I can't, physically do the things I used to be able to do. I can't swim. I can't be off the oxygen anymore. I can't hike. I can't go on walks. I can barely take my dog on a walk. If I miss any treatments, I'm screwed. If I miss pills, I'm screwed. I have to be in the hospital a lot more. I have to be on IV antibiotics a lot more. I'm pretty much like on a very tight leash about what I actually can manage nowadays. And so, I had to get a wheelchair, and now I have to be in a wheelchair if I want to exert myself really at all. So it's interesting because even as all that changed, and even as all that kind of progressed, I still didn't really feel. So even as my health declined a lot, I still didn't really feel like any of it was real, And the thing is, you always know on a kind of logistical standpoint that things are getting worse, but you don't actually realize that means you're getting closer to the point where you're not going to have any options left, and your only option is going to be to lay there and die. You don't really ever lay it out for yourself that clean cut. So a few months back, I was in the hospital for another exacerbation, and I was on IVs, and my portacath stopped working. And my portacath it's a central line, which means it's under the skin. It's constantly connected to your heart, so you can constantly just access a needle into it and get direct access, direct IV access, without having to dig around in your arm and find a vein. And that's really important when you have CF, because our veins are completely blown and tiny, and it's impossible to get one, and we're on copious amounts of antibiotics. So it's really, it's like near impossible to not have a central line. And if you can't have a port, then you have to have a pick, which means you can't get it wet. And it's like, again, details. It's complicated. But having the port break on me was when things really changed, because I realized that I was too sick to go under anesthesia and get a surgery and get the portacath fixed. So this would be like the end. I'd have to do a pick, and then from there I'd have to do some IV access, and then it would just keep progressing downwards and downwards until I was on my deathbed. And so So that was very jarring for me, and that was only a few months ago. And so one of the big things, what we're looking at now as far as health goes, is I'm incredibly sick. I'm in what they call end-stage lung disease. So it's where I have around 27 to 28% lung function right now as my average. So if I get sick, it goes even lower than that. And if I'm really, really healthy, I can get it up to around 30 maybe. But it's 28% average, which is pretty low. And on top of that, I have a lot of other issues in my other organs. So if I was to do nothing, and if I was to keep doing the treatments I was doing and keep kind of sustaining myself, I would have less than a year. And not only that, because I feel like that's not ever, for me, that's not a good indicator, because again, I was told I was going to have 2 years, like 2.5 years ago, and then when I was a kid, I was told I was going to have 5 years. So it's not like I haven't outlived the time stamp many times before. What having a life expectancy like that really looks like for me is just that in a year I'm going to be pretty much incapable of doing much of anything besides my health. And for me, that's not really like a life if you're completely incapacitated by your disease. So they give it around a year if nothing changes. However, there is an option, which is lung transplant, and that's something that I've chosen to do now and to take on. So if I get a lung transplant, if I get put on the list and everything goes accordingly, which that is going to be its own separate video, I promise. Lung transplant is even more complicated than just CF in general. Lung transplant is definitely its own beast of burden, but if I choose to get a lung transplant, which I am choosing to get a lung transplant, you can have anywhere from a year to 5 years to 10 years to 15 years, depending on how well the lungs work and how well they match up with your body and how well your body takes it and how strong you are. So because my body's pretty weak, you don't know if it's going to give you another year of life or another 5 or 10 or whatnot. But it is my only option currently. And it's huge. It's a really, really big procedure. And it is like trading one disease for a different disease. So it's not being cured, it's not being fixed. But it is a chance at like more time, and it is a chance of not completely trapping yourself. Because for me, and part of my resistance to ever even talking about transplant and why I've always had such a weird block in my brain around it is because I'm not trying to cure myself. I'm not trying to be healthy. Being healthy would be wonderful and be, a gift that I don't think I really expected to get. But that's not the main motivator for me, because I've been sick my entire life and I've still managed to be okay, So I'm not desperately trying to rid myself of my disease, because that's not really feasible. For me, it's that I don't ever want to feel completely trapped, and I don't ever want to feel like there's no options and there's nowhere that I can apply my energy, because that is a weird sort of mental thing, is that if I'm gonna go, I don't want to go feeling like I let myself be pushed up against a wall. I want to feel like there was always somewhere that I was pushing myself, or there's somewhere that I was applying myself. And I think it's time for a transplant. For the first time in my life, I feel like it's actually time. And there's a lot of different factors that went into that decision, and I feel like most days don't feel like I'm, able to even make that decision, because it feels very daunting. Even though I've made the decision to do lung transplant, there's definitely still days where I wake up and I don't want to do it. And the other thing that's really important to note here is that, and this is important for me to note to myself, is that there is still a huge chance of all of this failing. There's a million different things that can go wrong with a transplant. There's a million things that can go wrong before a transplant or the year after a transplant. And it's not a cure, but it is a way to kind of get more time so I don't feel trapped. And that's currently what I got. So that's what I'm going for. So that's my life expectancy. If I don't get put on a transplant list, probably around a year, maybe more, maybe less. If I do get put on a transplant list and I do get a transplant, we'll see. So there you go. There's that. There's the life expectancy video that I've been needing to make for quite some time. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'm gonna go eat some chicken fajitas now because I deserve it. And I'll make another video soon. Alright, bye.